Anger is a tricky one, I would say, especially for females. Very shiftable, but anger can often be a layered emotion because not only do we not want to feel anger or express anger because we are conditioned that it's a very unflattering and negative emotion, but also anger is often covering over something else. So it might be covering over fear. And underneath the anger is actually fear that you have made a mistake or that you are being played by someone or everyone is about to humiliate you. Like, anger is a defensive emotion that is often protecting something underneath it. So, powerful ways to shift anger. First of all, we have to recognize it and articulate and let our brain know, yes, we hear you, this is anger. And that already downgrades and shifts the emotion because our body and our brain and our nervous system knows that we are now consciously listening, and it doesn't need to keep amplifying to let you know to shift this emotion. So anger is often helped by acknowledgement. Anger is often also associated with a lack of appreciation, validation, or recognition. And we can get very, very resentful when we are over giving, over functioning, working on something, contributing certain things to relationships when they are unnoticed and recognized. So we can actually provide that to ourselves. We can provide the self-care and self-love that we need to put ourselves first and to stop putting everyone else first, because that is the number one way to become resentful, is to give and give and give and give without ever getting anything in return or any acknowledgement. So we can acknowledge ourselves and we can start to put ourselves first before we overgive and overfunction. And often overgiving and overfunction is coming from a place of wanting approval and validation. We need people to need us in order to feel good. So we over deliver, overfunction, and then we get resentful because it's not acknowledged. So we do that for ourselves. We acknowledge ourselves. We acknowledge how much we've showed up. We recognize all our contributions, and we start to give ourselves the pat on the back and the validation approval that we want from everyone else. Then we start giving from a much cleaner energy than giving because we need the validation. We're giving because we genuinely want to do it from our heart. The other thing about anger that I would say is it can also often come from someone crossing your boundaries. Now, if someone is crossing your boundaries, if life is a mirror, it means you are crossing your own boundaries. Ultimately, you are allowing someone to do something to you that doesn't feel good. You are not setting a clear boundary of what you can and cannot tolerate. And so instead of having the capacity and the strength to express cleanly and honestly and authentically, we express by putting the blame onto someone outside of us, when ultimately we are angry with ourselves because we allowed ourselves to get into that situation and we allowed ourselves to be taken advantage of, even though usually we know when our boundaries are being crossed. So I'm not a fan of saying, this is my boundary. I think we can do it energetically by not engaging with people who overstep our boundaries. So it's about having really clear and clean ideas about what is and is not acceptable to you and operating within those guidelines. And the other thing I will say about anger is that often, ultimately it is anger at ourselves for allowing things to happen, anger at ourselves for mistakes, anger at ourselves for the way our lives have gone down, anger at life. And this shows that you're out of balance and you're not seeing the gifts or the positives of some negative situations in your life, because it is a law of energy, a law of biology, a law of nature, a law of the universe, that in order even for an atom to exist, there's an equal amount of positive and negative charge. And when we are only seeing the negative in a situation or a person, then we can really go down a rabbit hole of anger But if we can see the gifts in every situation and shift back into neutrality and our perception, then we can often shift anger very easily because we get back into balance. We're seeing the totality of the picture and not just get laser focused on our negative perception. And often, sometimes the gift is purely growth. You know, when we're angry at ourselves for making mistakes, it becomes a bit of a paradox because often going through the experience of making that mistake was the only way to gain the knowledge and the tools and the skills you needed to improve and upgrade your life. So mistakes are actually the greatest learning environment. We've all seen a toddler and a baby learn to walk. It takes a lot of mistakes, a lot of reps, and it's the same for any skill or ability in our adult lives as well. And, you know, making mistakes is often the fastest way to growth. And we, instead of holding ourselves to an impossible standard and seeing ourselves through the knowledge and perspective we have now, back then, we can see ourselves as the person we were at the time who didn't have the knowledge that we got through the mistake. And we can trust that we did not have a guidebook, we did not have a handbook on what to do in that situation, but going through the mistake was the fastest way to learn. So we can shift anger at ourselves by seeing the upgrade in growth and skills and knowledge through any mistake. We can shift anger at other people by being clearer on what we do and do not accept, and shift the anger towards ourselves for allowing things to happen with other people. We can shift anger at situations by giving ourselves more recognition and validation and eliminating the over-functioning, over-giving, over-delivering mode where we step into resentment really quickly. And we can transmute that anger by taking the information that it gave us to let us know that we are overgiving or angry at ourselves or needing to sort of be clearer in what we tolerate. And it's a brilliant mechanism for improving our lives. And I would also say that we can look under the lid a little bit of anger and see if there might actually be some fear there. Because often when we're angry at someone or something, it's also telling us that we might actually just be afraid of how that person perceives us, of being inadequate, of experiencing shame. You know, sometimes we'll project onto someone else the anger at what they're doing because we are ashamed or fearful of feeling the emotion underneath the anger, which is probably humiliation, loss, or guilt.